In any case, should we get started?
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Let's do it.
let's do it. Yeah. So first of all, everyone, welcome to Topics in Finance, mysteriously named course. Topics in Finance, the version that you're taking from us. So from us being, me, Professor Kondo, and the co-teacher, Alex Barrett, who is teaching a course for the first time and probably knows his shit better than me because he was a VC at Canada's kind of most prominent VC firm, Inovia, for several years, and recently decided to join the operator side of the startup ecosystem by becoming the chief of staff, which is one of the more important positions in a startup or in a scale up or company in general, at a startup called Renault Run, Montreal-based startup, but really one of Canada's most exciting startups. Raised a major funding round by a prominent new player, not that new anymore, I guess, but new-ish player in the space that's disrupting the landscape of raising capital for startups, Tiger Global, over the summer. Anyway, I think it's actually a real treat that we get to experience this course together with Alex. I'm definitely looking forward to learning a lot myself from the interactions we have over the course of the semester. But the course itself, you know what? Maybe I will start sharing my slides. So just give me 1 second here. Sharing my slides, where? I've got my syllabus open and I've got my lecture notes. Can you guys see my lecture notes now?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll just start a little bit with this, then I'll move to the syllabus. Alex, feel free to chime in at any point. But I just want to give a little bit of a lay of the land on this course. So the title itself, we're calling it Experiential VC and Startups. But I think of it as, this course is kind of, it's either a tale of two courses or it's a course with two personalities. Because there's kind of two things that we're going to be focusing on doing in this class. The two things may seem separate to people who don't have experience in the space, but the two are intimately interconnected. And hopefully, even after just today's lecture, you guys will be on board with that statement. And if not, and yet you still decide to continue on with the course, then hopefully at least you will come to agree on this point, at least somewhat, over the course of the semester. So the course, like the two personalities of the course, I would say, are the following. One aspect of the course, which is not obvious from the fact that it's a finance class or from the title of the course, Experiential VC and Startups, is that we will focus on learning a lot in a specific way in this class. And it's a way that I think is fairly distinct from the way we typically learn in finance courses, which is we're going to focus on learning by conversation. So this course is going to be centered around sessions with guest speakers. And the way we're going to organize these 3-hour sessions, most of the time, unless something unexpected arises, and things can happen in the real world. But barring any unexpected events, our sessions will involve a guest speaker. And we've tried to line up a really kind of A+ list of speakers that we think are just amazing to learn from. And the way we'll do these sessions is, loosely speaking, the first half of the session will be interacting with the speaker. And the way we'll do that, and we'll make adjustments if we think things can be improved, but you can loosely think of it as the event will start with a fireside chat that either Alex leads or I lead, or maybe we'll co-lead sometimes. We'll see. We'll play it by ear. But we'll do a fireside chat with the speaker where we have a conversation with them. Generally speaking, Alex and I will have a rough plan of what we hope to accomplish from a conversation. We will expect you guys to prepare in advance of these conversations as well. So to spend time before the live session, doing some due diligence on the person who will be speaking, trying to think about what would you like to learn from them. You guys are more than welcome, if you have strong views there, to even email us about it, because we might incorporate some of what you recommend. We don't have a monopoly on the most interesting things to ask. So we're definitely open to feedback there. But then we'll do that conversation. The first part will be kind of, you guys will be more of an audience. But in that first half, if we call the first half roughly an hour and a half, it's going to be a little bit less than that, but roughly an hour and a half. About an hour of it might be the fireside chat, and about 30 minutes of it will be you guys having a direct opportunity to ask questions with the speaker. Right? And we really hope and fully expect that you guys will take advantage of that opportunity, because we think it's a unique opportunity. And we're certain that you guys are going to ask awesome questions, because I've done informal events a little bit of this flavor with students in the past, and I think they've gone really well. And in general, in classes, you guys ask great questions. So you guys shouldn't be afraid to ask questions. Sometimes people are afraid to participate a little bit because they're worried they'll ask a question that's too basic, or a question will reveal that they have a lot left to learn. Let me tell you a little fact, which is like some of the best questions are simple and basic questions, right? So there's actually really no such thing as a question that's too basic. I don't think. No one has ever asked a basic question where I've been like, hey, what the fuck is wrong with that person? No, these questions are good. And probably there's other people in the audience who will be like, oh man, I'm happy the person asked that question. The other thing is, okay, what did I say? So I said no such thing as too basic of a question. Another thing is, like, you need to learn to not be afraid to ask questions, right? Because if you have that hesitance to ask, it's going to slow down your learning. And if by being afraid to ask, you end up not asking anything, you're going to make the wrong impression, right? So, look, we highly, we hope and expect that these sessions with student engagement are going to be fun for you guys and are going to be great opportunities to learn, and that you guys will make a good impression on us and on the speakers. And I think that'll be the secret to also making the speakers super happy about the experience. The more you guys engage with them, the more impressed they'll be with McGill in general, and the more likely they will want to re-engage with the institution and hire folks from the institution, right? So there's only wins to be had. Like, I wouldn't be worried about the downside there. Anyway, so just I know, like, it can be a little bit weird when we do it on Zoom, but that's the plan for these sessions. So first half of the session is that. Our goal is to make these guest speaker sessions as useful as possible, because I'm sure you guys have experienced a lot of guest speaker sessions in your time at Des Hôtels where you've been like, wow, that was fun. And then a week later, you're like, oh, wow, I don't remember what the hell happened at that thing, right? We will try to kind of focus sufficiently on generating useful, actionable insights from these conversations. Now, in order to make this work well, as I already alluded to, you need to prepare for the conversation. Now, when I say prepare, I do not mean write down a rigid set of questions and literally start engaging with the speaker like you're a surveyor. That is not the right way to do it. So it's kind of like you find this right balance on preparation between having a set of things you want to ask, but being ready to, like, adjust on the fly on the basis of how the conversation is going, so that the questions are as natural as possible. That's really important because A, that makes it funner for the other side. And B, trust me when I say this, if the speaker who knows way more than you about the topic is pushing the conversation in a different way, there's probably a reason for it. It's probably because they're pushing it to more important things. And so before like trying to like shift them back to what you thought was the right thing to do ahead of time, you want to have some humility and you want to say like, okay, this probably means something. Let me see what it goes. I'm going to throw away all these sets of questions that I wrote down ahead of time. Maybe I'll be able to get back to them later. But now I'm just going to start going into basic question mode so that I can start to understand why they're shifting it that way. Right? So it's kind of like the way I think about it is like these conversations sometimes are about, you know, if I wanted to give a tennis analogy to it, it's like good conversationalists sometimes, they need to focus on the return of serve. The return of serve, you don't control everything, right? The server decides whether they're going to serve fast to your backhand or a slice to your forehand. And you need to react the best way possible to what they give at you, right? So part of it is reactionary, and over planning ain't the right way to do it. By the way, over planning ain't the right way to do almost anything in the startup ecosystem because there's so much uncertainty. So actually learning to be reactionary, flexible, it's got a benefit for learning by conversation. It's got a benefit for thinking about startup strategy. It's got a benefit on so many dimensions. Go ahead.
Maybe just a point there, Jiro. I agree with everything you're talking about. I think the way we've designed this course is honestly to be as real world as possible. You might hear us say that a lot today. Honestly, when you jump into a VC firm or into a startup, it may sound cliche, but there is absolutely no textbook for what success looks like in that role. Nobody's going to tell you what performance is and give you a performance grid. Nobody's going to tell you how to succeed. Nobody's going to tell you how to prepare for the next week. These are very self-managed environments where you need to be able to self-define what good looks like and figure out what the most important things to look at are. And so the no textbook approach is one where we're going to talk about some really, really interesting topics in this course. Everything from like how to source a deal to like how like exit considerations of founders, like war stories of how people have raised capital and everything in between. And we're not going to basically say this is what you need to go read in advance of the class. We're going to point you in the right direction in really interesting subjects for you to go investigate. And the purpose of doing that, as Jiro said, is to figure out like where these conversations could head. Where did the speaker going to focus? What are we going to focus on in the Q&A session? How are we going to debrief and brainstorm that afterwards? And the more like interesting research we do, the better. So don't read about anything that's boring to you. Don't read about stuff that is just like, go find the topic of that week that you find really compelling and go deep on that, because that's the one that's going to produce like the best and most curious question in your mind. The other one thing I'll say is that one of my biggest challenges when joining a VC firm was something called Imposter Syndrome. And it's something that I hear over and over and over again from people jumping from the academic world into industry, is that you jump into an environment with a lot of really smart people that you perceive to be smarter than you and more accomplished than you. And when you're faced on a one-on-one call or in a room or in a partner meeting or something where you've got a CEO that spent the last 15 years operating companies and has IPO'd a company, it can be extremely daunting to figure out how to talk to that person. Even one-on-one, sometimes it's difficult to figure out how to talk to that person because your mind perceives them as kind of like in a different class or tier. That is something that is really, really difficult to overcome. And I'm hoping that through some of these guest speaker conversations, that we'll be able to overcome that together, where we can actually learn how to like engage with these people as if they're our peers and if they're our equals, rather than putting them in some different bucket. Because while that's a perception, the reality is that most smart people, and almost everybody that I know in the entrepreneurship and venture capital world, loves sharing their time, loves sharing their insights and learnings with people, and loves meeting other people that are just curious and hungry for learning and growth. And so like, if we can accomplish one thing in this course, it would be breaking down your ability to converse with smart people. The more smart people you're capable of conversing with, the faster your career trajectory is going to grow. So I think that's what we can strive to accomplish through some of these Q&A sessions and conversations.
Yeah, and one of the things that Alex alluded to is really what will be the second part of each of our sessions that have a guest speaker, which is after the guest speaker session, the rest of our sessions will be us as a group collectively brainstorming on what the most important, interesting, and actionable things that we learned from the guest speaker session are. And that's meant to emphasize the fact that if you're going to learn by conversation, you must reflect after the conversation. You don't just kind of show up for the call, then end the call and go do some other shit. No, you think before the call, you do the call, you think after the call. And when you think after the call, you ask yourself, well, what can I change in my behavior right now as a result of the call? What are the most important follow-up questions that I should have in the back of my mind? You make an assessment of, is there an opportunity to ask the person you had a conversation with about that quickly? Or should you wait a little while? Should you change your actions and let the person know that like you're grateful because some of what they said made you change your behavior? Like these things help fortify relationships as well, right? Doing a conversation right pays dividends on so many different angles. They make you learn faster. They make you form relationships faster. They get you making the right actions, hopefully faster. Things like that. So, our hope is with the brainstorming sessions is that they give a more interactive opportunity to kind of think about how to do that reflection part that is critical to learning by conversation. If you don't reflect afterwards, you will forget, right? So that's what we'll tend to do in the second half of the course. And one of the things that Alex said that I really like is that he emphasized that our course does not have any required readings. Look, we hope that you don't interpret no required readings as like, I don't need to do shit before I come here on Tuesday nights. If you do it, it's your loss, and you probably won't make an impression on us. It's going to hurt your grade. But it'll just literally destroy your ROI on this course, is the more important thing. But we don't want to micromanage what you read. We will give you some guidance, like, hey, you might find these things interesting. But at the end of the day, if there's one thing that you're curious about and another one that you're more meh-ish on, I completely agree with Alex. Do a deep dive on the thing you're more interested in. Maybe start with the thing we recommend, but then go find your own stuff that allows you to dig deeper. It might be reading, it might be finding a YouTube video. It might be, scanning your network to see if you know someone that's done something there. Like, be opportunistic. Don't waste any opportunity to learn. And in the process of doing that, in the process of looking at, say, recommended readings and saying like, I like this, I don't like this, you also use it as an opportunity to learn a bit about yourself. What are you curious about? What are you good at? Because at the end of the day, a lot of how you navigate almost everything that we will talk about in this course is best done when you are self-aware about what your superpower is and what your super interests are. Because those are the things that'll bring the best out of you. So there isn't a one size fits all strategy for like preparing for any of the things we do. So as I said, two personalities in the course. Learning by conversation is one of them. And the other one is something that is critical to being a successful VC, and that requires you to have an intimate awareness of startups and the startup ecosystem landscape, which is sourcing deals, which is like becoming aware of the right investment opportunities and sizing them up and convincing them to take your money instead of someone else's, right? Investment in private markets is different from investment in public markets. If you feel good about an opportunity in the public market, you can go buy it. There is a market price, it's traded. There's a lot of liquidity in public markets. That's not the way private markets work. And so because of that, there's a whole host of strategies around sourcing opportunities, becoming aware of them, knowing how to due diligence them when you don't have as much public domain information on them, and then convincing the entity to take your money and making the case that that last point, that the company is rational to take your money. You need to think and be deliberate about this. And when we think of sourcing, you can think of it as sourcing a startup, right? As in like, I will make this investment in the startup. But, sometimes you think more long-term with sourcing, and you start thinking about, how do I source talent? How do I form a relationship with the entrepreneur before they start something or before their startup is ready to raise? How do I network with talent that I can help some of my portfolio companies recruit so that these portfolio companies become bigger, stronger, more likely to succeed? So you don't just think of it very short term on who am I going to invest in the next 6 months. Depending on the circumstances, you might take a more long-term perspective. Could be a year or two. If you're pretty comfortable on the idea that you can raise your next funding round, you might sometimes be like, I'm willing to look at some stuff where it may not necessarily pay dividends for another 5 years, right? Like the horizon is something where there's some situation-specific thought that can go into. And some of these things might be changing as well with changes that we've seen in the VC landscape, right? So for instance, Alex, I'm guessing you would agree with this, but like the rise of the option of permanent capital, evergreen funds, might change how myopic versus long-term VCs are in their horizon of talent search, for instance. Again, speculation, because it's kind of a bit of a new thing. It was big news with Sequoia over the summer, I believe. It's either summer or fall. I don't really remember anymore. I'm old enough that decades fly by. But yeah, and then there's questions of like elements of sourcing. What are the best practices around sourcing? I have a list here. I won't talk about it right now. But the other personality of the course is going to be thinking at a practical level about how we do that. And we'll talk less directly about this in our guest speaker sessions, but a big deliverable in the course will be a final project that in aggregate is worth 45% of your final grade. And that final project will be putting this part of the course front and center. And hopefully the project, we define it in a way that is fun, engaging to everyone. Again, like our view, it's never been more essential to do this sourcing part right if you want to be a VC or if you want to be an investor in the startup space. And I think we both believe that being good at learning by conversation can be extremely helpful in helping you be an effective sourcer of deals, among many other things. Alex, not sure if you want to chime in with anything extra on what I just said, but yeah, important to note. Those are the two parts of the course.
Yeah, and we'll go a bit deeper on the second piece there, sourcing deals, in the second half of today's lecture. I have a little presentation to share and some tips and tricks on how to do so. But 100%, as you said, Jiro, the business of being a venture capitalist is very much the business of figuring out how to sell yourself. If you're looking to get people to talk to you before they've started companies, if you're looking to source talent, if you're looking to convince somebody to take your capital over somebody else's, the only reason to do so is because you're an interesting person to talk to, or you bring them something that they don't already have. And so your sole mission as a venture capitalist is to figure out what that is. How can I be an interesting person? How can I bring this founder a thought or a question or an intuition that they don't have before? How can I be a trusted friend, partner to that individual? And that is where my entire focus was for 5 years as a VC, was on how to brand myself in that way and speaking with founders. Speaking with founders is the #1 skill you need to build, and we will help you build it in this course so that if you're interviewing for a venture capital firm, if you're interviewing for a startup, you will understand the way these businesses operate and understand the vibe and impressions that you want to give off on management teams and founders, because that is the core skill.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, right? If you're effective at learning by conversation, the person you're talking to will notice that. And they'll probably trust, the judgment that you bring to them, because they're like, if you learned well from them, you probably learned well from many others. So you've got stuff to bring. And by the way, the stuff you bring isn't necessarily always answering the person's question, right? So it's not just about providing an answer to everything, because you know what? No one's able to do that. No one is actually a know-it-all, right? Sometimes what you bring is not the right answer to the startup founder. It's the right question. And because the startup founder may be asking the wrong question, but once they know the right question to answer, they may actually very well be better at answering it than you are, right? And when you ask them the right question that like opens up their mind to something new, like they remember that long term. And someone who's really good at getting them to focus on the right thing, because they're spread thin all the time, they appreciate that, right?
Yeah, and something to add on to that, Jiro, is that, and I've trained a bunch of venture capitalists in my last couple of years there and since leaving. And one of the questions I get most often from people starting in the role is like, it's great that you tell me I need to go talk to founders and stuff, but then founders ask me questions and I have no idea what the fuck the answers are, because I'm not experienced, right? I just jumped into this role. What I try to tell people is that you never need to know the answer. You need to know how to find the answer. So that's also part of the skills we're building here. Is I'd be willing to bet that you're going to ask a lot of questions in this course, and there's going to be a lot of them that I'm not going to know how to answer, but I'll be able to find them, whether that be through my network, whether that be through my resourcefulness, whether that be through knowing where to look and developing those skills. Founders would ask me stuff I had never heard of before, and my job is to go and figure that out. And if I go and figure that out and come back to the founder, I'm starting to build trust. So that's another thing that we'll just try to develop a routine and habit for.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay not to know, but it's extremely valuable to be a little bit of a learn-it-all, where like once you realize there's something important you don't know, you do the best you can to figure it out quickly. Yeah, so I agree 100%, Alex. Oh, maybe I'll mention one thing, because this might be material to you. I don't know. I don't think it should be, but it could be. Like all of our sessions are going to be recorded. And unless our guest speakers end up saying something that they don't want in public domain, unless that's the case, we will share these recorded sessions with you, but we won't just share it with you. We'll post it on YouTube and share it with the world. So, just want you to know that by taking this course, we are viewing it as you guys are okay with us sharing a video that may have your face pop up at some point or something like that. Because, look, our view is with these sessions, I think both Alex and I believe in sharing things like this with as many people as possible. Realistically, there aren't that many people who will care, but nonetheless. But in addition to that, like by recording this and sharing it more broadly outside the four corners of this class, we believe we are being more respectful to the speakers for their time, right? And that's important, because their time is scarce. And the more they feel we try to generate returns from their time, the more they will be eager to work with us in the future, and the more connected they'll feel with McGill. Now, I'm saying this out loud. We're doing it for the first time. I haven't really overthought what we'll share, what we won't share. We may not share publicly the brainstorming sessions. So it's quite possible that what we'll do is the speaker session and the Q&A, we'll share that, but the brainstorming session afterwards, we'll just share it internally with the class. We'll play that by ear. And if you have strong opinions there, you can let us know. Alex, what do you think about that? Does that seem sense? We didn't quite discuss this before. There'll be a lot of situations where we didn't. Yeah, okay, anyway, good. But I just want you guys to know that, because I don't want there to be any uncomfortable surprises. So
yeah, I want to hear some radical views and opinions in the brainstorming sessions and get into some cool debates. So maybe we keep those private.
Yeah, that seems fine with me. So that's probably, again, so yeah, maybe that's the way we'll do it. And the advantage there as well is that everyone will feel comfortable to be really open. When
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe, yeah, I mean, saying it out loud, that seems like the right way to go. So that's the way we'll do it. So everyone has been notified. Let's see. Maybe
And that's how you make decisions in startups.
Exactly. Exactly. By the way, this class is a startup, its own little tiny startup, right? We're figuring it out in real time. So look, I'm just skipping here to the syllabus. So, some of this stuff we've already said, experiential in nature, really trying to focus on how things are done in practice, how you learn in the real world. By the way, 10 years into your career, most of what you'll know, you will not have learned at McGill. You will have learned in the real world. And if you're good at learning by conversation, you will have learned a lot more than if you're not. And that means your human capital compounds. 10 years of compounding, that makes a big difference. So any improvement you make at learning in the real world will move the needle once you get to the meat of your career. And more generally, learning by conversation is really about thinking about a strategy around self-learning, right? And so you will want to have strategies and go-to sources of where we can get information that helps us better prepare for conversations, better reflect after a conversation, and more generally learn in other ways. Classroom engagement is going to be so important in making this course a success, right? That's the whole point of the brainstorming sessions, is that we learn together. By the way, we will literally brainstorm, and folks will be encouraged to write down notes as they're brainstorming. And when we think about the way this course is going to be graded, as Alex already said, no required textbook in the class. So I don't think I need to talk about that. But talking about how we'll do the brainstorming session, there's going to be one important deliverable for the course that is related to this brainstorming session, which is going to be a lecture synthesis. In almost every session, Alex and I are not going to prepare lecture notes. There will be no lecturing of the traditional sense. After the lecture, we will figure out how to synthesize what we learned from the guest speaker session and from the brainstorming session. And it won't be Alex and I's responsibility to make some content, to synthesize it. It will be the class's responsibility. So you guys will all, in homework teams, be responsible for synthesizing at least 3 sessions over the course of the semester. Now, some of the sessions we're going to randomly assign to some groups just to make sure that every session will at least have one group synthesizing. We don't want something where like this, everyone decides they don't want to synthesize this one, so it's a big blank. So we will randomly assign so that every session is covered, but you guys will have some measure of choice as well. So in some cases, you'll get to decide for yourself, do I want to synthesize this one or not? In aggregate, you guys will have to do at least 3. Each of the 3, what you submit will be graded and it will be worth 5% of your final score. You are allowed to do more than 3 if you want, and we will grade them, right? The deliverable does not need to be an essay. The deliverable does not need to be a set of slides. Do what you think works. We leave it to you, and we'll just judge whether we think it's effective or not. It'll be judged on the basis of creativity, rigor, usability. It could be the best thing that's ever been written, but if I'm pulling my hair out while I'm reading it, and I've got a lot of hair to pull out now, I'm not going to be happy to have read it, and I'm not going to give you a high score. Neither will Alex, even if he has less. What? You probably have the same number of hairs. It's just each of my hairs is longer at this point.
And this open-endedness is not meant to say, go build the most complex, longest thing possible. This is not meant to create work.
No, not at all.
This means like work smart and figure out what matters and synthesize that. Imagine you're submitting an investment memo or a recap of a meeting to a partner at a firm. They are not going to read a 50-page detailed analysis of something. So this has to just like the goal is in essentially the most creative and effective way possible, synthesize the lecture to its simplest form of the key learnings. and do it in the medium that conveys that message the most effectively, whatever that may be.
Yeah, at the end of the day, a synthesis is not supposed to be an encyclopedia. It's supposed to be content in some form that is easy to digest and easy to remember, right? So this UX of the deliverable is, we think, equally, if not more important than, how much brilliant stuff is in there. There is such thing as too much brilliant stuff. And I'm sure you guys have all experienced it with most classroom experiences. Sometimes you're just rifled too much stuff. It's impossible to remember. I'm sure I violate this all the time in my courses. It is what it is. But like in the real world, as opposed to, it's funny. It's like my fiance keeps telling me that like I put too much stuff in everything I do. And I'm like, well, people don't drop my course that much. And so she's like, or like, students don't actively complain. She's like, your audience is captive, so they can't really leave. They're probably afraid to complain. And so like, just remember, in the real world, people don't have, your market doesn't have that degree of patience. And they have a lot of other options. So that'll matter in these deliverables. But I think Alex and I both do love creativity. So if you find some interesting way to effectively convey something, like we will, at the end of the day, we'll give you a maximum of 5 points, but we will remember it, and we'll give you credit in that sense. So that's kind of one of the important sets of deliverable in the class is in some sense the course materials will be prepared after the fact by you guys, and our hope is it'll be awesome materials, and hopefully materials that you guys can be proud of. Another deliverable in the course is going to be that in one of our sessions, and this session is going to be led by Alex, is we're going to do a board simulation where we will pick one homework team to play the role of the startup, and we'll pick one or two other homework teams to play the role of board members in the startup, and you guys will simulate a board meeting. So we'll do that live in the session instead of a guest speaker. And so that'll be the deliverable for between 2 and 3 teams. I don't think it'll work quite as well if we try to have everyone involved, just too many cooks in the kitchen. And it's not the kind of thing that I think works that effectively in breakout rooms. So I think it's better to just have some teams do it and the rest of the teams observe and then engage in commentary in the brainstorming part of the session. For the teams that don't need to prepare in advance for actually executing the simulation, you guys instead will do some alternative project. It might be like a venture firm landscape kind of mini project, or it may be something else. Like some of these things are all like potentially going to change and morph a little bit as we do things in the semester and kind of figure out what works, what doesn't work. So things may evolve. Just remember, this is the first version of this course. This is like a startup. The first thing a startup does is called a minimum viable product. This is a minimum viable course. And with a minimum viable course, you must be ready to make adjustments on the fly because you probably don't have it all right from the get-go. We almost surely don't. So we'll make changes as we learn things about you guys and about, how this thing is going. So everything, beyond the lecture synthesis here. Well, okay. Some things might change. We're not going to reinvent the wheel at the last second, but so know that there's a little bit of uncertainty around things for the course in general, and you better be comfortable with this if you're going to take this course. If you're someone who's game to experiment, I think this can be fun, and I think it's going to be an opportunity for us to collaborate together to make this as good of a course as possible for you and for future generations.
I would also say if you hate uncertainty and uncertainty scares you, but you want to work in the VC or startup environment, take this course. Let us scare you because it's going to be something that's going to help you later.
Yeah. And it's a pretty low stakes environment to get comfortable with it, right? So so if it scares you, you make that decision of like whether you want to just give it a go because you're really, really interested in working in this industry. But also like if you're, yourself better than Alex and I know you, we barely know you. you need to make that judgment call on whether you think you're so scared and not sufficiently interested in a career in the space, and as a result might prefer to explore something else that's a better fit for you. We certainly won't judge you on the basis of that. But we do recommend that if this is not like immediately exciting to you, you want to think a little bit about that. That's your main reflection point on after the end of tonight's lecture, probably. But remember that in the real world, it's important to have grit and to tackle things that aren't comfortable. Sometimes you want to put yourself in situations where there's a bit of discomfort, because those tend to be the situations where you will learn and grow the most. So I agree with Alex on that point. Don't just say like, this is uncomfortable, I'm out. Think a little bit more long-term on the consequences of that. But we're not going to change that aspect of the course. We think it's a feature, not a bug. So what else are we going to do? There's going to be an investment memo that you guys need to prepare. This is going to be like you guys writing a short document that gets shared within the VC firm after you've heard a pitch, where you try to communicate to the other partners in the VC firm whether this company you met with seems promising enough to have a real discussion on whether an investment should be made, or more to the point, whether you should offer a term sheet, so offer to make an investment into the startup.
So we're going to have two companies pitch, one early stage and one growth stage, and they're going to actually pitch their companies the way they pitched it to VC firms. So you're going to see the real pitch, probably condensed for confidentiality reasons on their side, but you'll see a real pitch deck from both companies, and you'll get the opportunity to ask them questions during that session as if you were the VC making that decision, and create a memo afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, and you'll only need to do one memo, so you'll get to pick whether you want to do the memo for the early stage pitch or for the late stage pitch, growth stage pitch. And then finally, there's I think I said a 45% weight. I meant a 40% weight. It was initially 45, but I changed it, I think, before I posted the syllabus last night. I changed it from 45 to 40 because 40 still seemed like a big number to me, so that people would care. And it allowed me to up the percentage on participation from 15 to 20. Because I was like, 15 could sound a little bit too small for folks, because they might be like, I can still technically get an A if, anyway. So talent and startup sourcing project. It'll be 40%. There's going to be a first deliverable due at the end of like roughly the first half of the course, where you kind of like establish a document where what we envision right now is that you lay out a methodology that you're using to find, one good talent and one good startup from the Montreal area to bring to an event that we will host at the end of the course, where we will everyone will bring, one startup founder, one interesting talent that might do something interesting in the startup ecosystem in the future. And we'll just do a Zoom event with that. By the way, if this all seems vague, it's vague. We'll bake it together. Alex and I aren't the chefs on that one. We will all we'll do a crowdsourced event. But what that means is one thing you'll be expected to be doing over the course of the semester, and we'll see how this works in our current regime, but is you'll be expected to actually find ways to meet people that actually are doing stuff in the startup ecosystem in Montreal. And you're more than welcome to ask us for strategies around this, either after classes or via email. If you have some ideas, you can ping them by us, and we'll be more than happy to tell you whether we think it looks like an interesting thing to do. But look, at the end of the day, sourcing is the core role of a VC. This is kind of core to the experience. So if we don't do this, how can we call this an experiential course? So this project is really all about that. And then finally, because we think participation is extremely important for you actually getting comfortable with and enhancing the learning by conversation experience in in this course, there is a 20% participation weight in the class. But let me be clear, there's multiple ways to participate. Like, I realize not everyone is, especially early on, going to be comfortable chiming in real time. And so that is not the only way to participate. In fact, a couple of things to say about participation. You don't need to be participating by asking questions every 15 minutes to be a good participant. In fact, you know, we care about quality way over quantity, right? Parsimony is actually important. If you ask a bunch of questions, but they don't really move the needle on things, you won't make the right impression. If you ask a few questions that like change someone's thinking on stuff, that's much more memorable. So quality over quantity is how we assess this. And we're flexible in how we judge participation, right? So it can be participating in the live sessions, but it can also be doing other things that help the mission of the course outside of the class. I see a question in the chat, so I'll just quickly check that out. Will there be a discussion board post? Maybe. If folks want it, I guess we could try to figure out a way to do it, especially if there's a low touch way for a discussion board to happen, then maybe we can visit this. I've never done a discussion board myself on my courses, and I generally hate the My Courses platform. But I don't know, Alex, what do you think about that?
I think Samuel should go create a course Slack chat and invite everybody in here to it.
Yeah, and then, by the way, Samuel, that gets you some participation credit. Look, literally, like, participation means do something either in the live session or outside of the class that combination achieves one of two things: adds value to the course experience for you and for others, or B, makes you more memorable to Alex and I. In a way that is also related to the mission of the course. Let me be clear. You know, like, look, some examples. I don't know, like, as I said, we'll be posting videos of our sessions on YouTube. Like, I don't know my shit with video editing. I don't think Alex does either. You know, if you guys have an idea of how we can make those videos more engaging to others, or make it look more professional, you're more than welcome to give it a go. We'll share the file with you. Do whatever it is you think would work. And if we think that that's actually, you know, useful, and there's like an easy way for this to be done for future videos, then yeah, you get participation credit from that. By the way, we're not telling you to do this, right? I'm giving this as an example, right? But like, ask yourself, in what way would you enjoy participating? Would that actually be valuable? And then do it. We're not going to tell you, you know, how like all the ways to participate and what counts as participation versus not. You do it and you see how we react to it.
I like this idea of building more value into the course for all participants. The Slack group is a great idea. I mean, try it, spin it up, see if anybody uses it.
Yeah. And Sam, we expect you to to play a bit of a role in moderation, or, you know, maybe someone else maybe like in the Slack channel, there ends up being like a few different channels, right? And like, there's a moderator for each channel who takes ownership of it. Because trust me, Alex and I will not do that. We'll check it out every once in a while, but we have finite time. Very finite time. And we're not getting a grade for the course. We're actually basically not being paid for the course either. So we're doing this because we want to do it and we want to have fun. But we have other stuff that we need to do. So like, we can't devote boundless amounts of time to this. So like, we won't be the most active moderators of channels. So those are opportunities for folks. And we'll figure out how to assess whether it was done well or not, and whether it seemed to have moved the needle. So we'll check it out, but we won't be like responding to every question We just simply don't have the bandwidth. Make sense to folks so far? Now, anyway, right? How do we assess creativity, resourcefulness, cross-functionality? I think you guys can read the syllabus. It's not that long.
And maybe on the next point on office hours, Jiro, we didn't talk about this, you and I. If people want to chat outside of the course, just email me and I'll set up time with any students. Happy to engage for whatever's needed in terms of course follow-ups and questions. I'm not going to block office hours, but just email me at my email in the syllabus. I'm extremely responsive, so I will find whatever time is necessary.
Yeah, I mean, if folks are cool with that, I'm happy with doing the same thing. I don't block a specific time. Reach out to me, and within reason, we'll schedule stuff. So let's just go with that. Done. Next point. Course webpage. We have a My Courses thing. We'll put things there. We'll put videos on YouTube. The brainstorming sessions we'll share solely with you guys, so we won't make that publicly available. So that will stay private within our little community. I mean, I guess.
Sorry, Jiro. One more point on the office hours and course communication. Yeah, I apparently have a McGill faculty email now, which I will not be checking that frequently. So I'll try to check that McGill email like once a week or something. But please email me at the one in the syllabus. Yeah, it'll be much quicker. Yep.
So noted. Hopefully noted. I shouldn't say noted for people that I don't know, but in any case, expected to be noted. I will check my McGill email, so you can email me there. Whatever, course webpage, honor code, EDI. You guys know the spiel on all those things. I don't think we need to discuss through that. But let's talk a little bit about tentative course schedule. Today is our course introduction. Recommended readings, you were not expected to recommend anything here. To read anything before today's session, but you may want to do this or related things to this after this session, right? So once you've decided like, okay, I'm down with this course, maybe you spend a little bit of time kind of doing some of these and then spend some time preparing for next week's session. Next week's session is going to be on exit considerations. Our speaker for next week's session is a pretty prominent McGill alumni, who, by the way, random fact, was once Alex's hockey coach, I think. Joel Leonoff. He was a key executive for a long time at a pretty prominent payments company, fintech company called PaySafe. Company that eventually went public, I think kind of went private again, then did a SPAC eventually or something. Anyway, I don't remember the full details around that. And is currently the sponsor of a SPAC called JOFF, J-O-F-F. So in the SPAC space, which is an interesting recent development in the set of exit opportunities for startups, he's kind of like done a fair amount of stuff there, more than almost most. Right? I think almost most, I guess most makes the almost kind of unnecessary to say. Anyway, so that's what we're going to do next session. And then we're going to do a few sessions, a couple at least, on the operating life cycle of a startup. Like basically the journey of a startup, not so much around financing, but around the strategic things that they do. We'll have Luis Beruga, who's one of my ex-students from my time before I became a McGill professor. I used to be a professor at the Northwestern Kellogg School of Management. So he was my student while I was there. And he's the CEO of Global X, really the company that's maybe most responsible for triggering the rise of thematic ETFs in the market. So like, an important company in the recent history of financial services. So we're going to have a conversation with him. Then we'll have a conversation with another fintech company that's in the robo-advisor digital investment platform space, a McGill alum, a Des Hôtels alum, called Mark Shawan. He's the founder CEO of this company, and he'll talk about operating life cycle, and we'll be focusing there a lot on international considerations because Sarwa is like the wealth simple of the Middle East. And so we'll talk a bit about the differences between, the fintech ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, the funding landscape in the MENA region, as contrasted from North America. A little bit of background on Sarwa. I like to tell folks that I have a morning job before my McGill job starts. And my morning job is at Sarwa. I was the third person to join the company. So the two people who joined before me were Mark and Jad Sayeg, who is also a McGill grad, but in engineering. They're the two principal co-founders of the company, and I was the next person who joined. And so I'm currently the founding advisor and the head of portfolio construction at the company. So I wake up at like 4 a.m. every day. And before my McGill day starts, I'm kind of doing what's necessary at this stage for some of the things I have ownership with there. And it's been fun so far and very, very rewarding. So one of the things it's taught me is the role of experiential learning. Because like when you're actually doing it, it's amazing how much more you learn in terms of the nuances versus the classroom. So for me, that's been a lot of fun. After we talk about operating life cycle, we'll talk about funding life cycle for a few sessions. So, pitching, raising early stage capital, raising growth capital, and some of the disruptive changes that have been occurring in the VC landscape. And we're not telling you who we're bringing in for these things yet. In some cases, we've got some modularity because we need to have plan Bs in case plan A's, things change. And some of it is we want to keep a little bit of anticipation in the course, where like a week or two before a session is when we'll let you know. I don't know. Our speculation is that that'll make it funner, but maybe we're wrong. And then after spring break, we'll have a session called Inside a VC Firm. So talking about how VC firms operate. And what are some initiatives that VC firms can undertake to give themselves more modern edges in things like deal sourcing. Alex is going to definitely be leading that one because speaking of Sarwa, unless rules prohibit me from doing this, I'm going to be in Sri Lanka that week for Sarwa's first annual retreat. So I'm not missing that because we started basically 5 years ago. So this is kind of like it's kind of a fulfilling kind of event for us. So I won't even be around, or even you won't even be able to reach me reading week and this week just because I'll be tied up with work Sarwa stuff the first week and then fun Sarwa stuff that week. Next session again is going to be led by Alex on board meetings. I may or may not be there depending on quarantine rules upon return from Sri Lanka. Then we're going to do deal evaluation stuff. That's where we're going to get startups come and pitch. And again, it's going to be real startups giving their real pitch, potentially tweaked just to keep like proprietary information proprietary. But you guys are going to get to see both of those things. And then you'll decide which firm do you want to write the investment memo for. And then we'll have a session at the end on talent identification. And then the final week of the course is going to be a course wrap up where it's that event that I alluded to. It's going to be the us kind of doing our kind of slightly unusual versions of a project where, like right after reading week, you'll give like that deliverable. And then that first deliverable that's worth 10%, that kind of lays out the method for what you've done so far and what you plan to continue doing to the event. You'll probably give a small deliverable at the event as well. And then the event will happen and we will judge on how well that works. We'll figure out what that means ourselves as it happens, to be honest. So we can't give you a ton of certainty on how all this assessment is going to work, but we'll try to be fair. And you guys are welcome to ask questions along the way, but we won't necessarily always have answers. Would you say that's accurate, Alex?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So this is a summary and overview of the course. Hopefully it sounds interesting to folks. I don't know, like we can do this in a couple of different ways right now. We can take a short break right now, and then both Alex and I will do little presentations where I will be focusing on talent sourcing and Alex will focus on deal sourcing and also giving you guys a lay of the land on some of like the important trends that are impacting VC. Leave it up to you. Do you want me to start my part first right now? Or would you like a little break first? Because we can, all of our 3-hour sessions, we'll put like a 15-minute break in the middle somewhere. But we're not always going to do it right at the middle. Like sometimes it's a little bit early, sometimes it's a bit later. How do folks feel right now? Want me to continue right now or want a little break? Or whatever. Alex, what do you want?
Any major questions on the outline?
Yeah.
Or anything we've covered so far?
Hi.
Hello.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Oh, yeah. Who spoke actually?
That was
There,
Elizabeth.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, can hear you. Oh, Elizabeth, nice to meet you.
We could hear you before.
Okay, great. Sorry about the echo. I have a few monitors hooked up. So I was just wondering, for the deal evaluation, is that going to be something done in Teams as is done the course?
Yeah. So the answer is everything except for participation will be done in Teams.
Okay.
Yeah, literally everything else will be done in Teams. You know what? Work in startups and in VC is done in Teams. We want to get you working in Teams.
That's what I gathered. Just wanted to clarify.
Cool. Yeah, it's a good question. It's an important one. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead, Alice.
Hi, I was wondering for all the things you were talking about, the deliverables, are you gonna give us a sense of like how to write it? Like if someone hasn't written an investment memo, like what should go?
Yeah. So like, no, not only we will do better than that. Actually, rather than us telling you how to do it, we'll let someone better than us tell you, because we're going to give you an example investment memo that was done by, I think honestly the most famous VC firm in the world, where they have an internal memo that's in public domain for how they wrote the memo for their YouTube investment. You will see that. And you can probably find some other internal memos online as well and triangulate with that. So yeah, the way it'll be done is we'll give you an example. We're not going to teach a lecture on writing an investment memo. It's kind of a little bit behind, like, there is a template to it, but there's also like situation specific deviations, right? But actually the YouTube memo is a really good one. And we will share that with you.
Thank you.
Yes, Wilson.
Yeah, apologies if you already answered this question, but what size should we be aiming for with our groups? I assume there's kind of a reasonable upper and lower limit, like don't get 8 people in a group, but I was wondering if there's anything more specific than that.
I think I may have written it in the syllabus, but I don't even remember the answer.
Yeah, four to five students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go with 4 to 5. Yeah. And you guys can self-form. If you need help finding a team, let us know. Maybe let me know, because I probably am in a better position to kind of manage that than Alex. I've got more experience with it. So, but there's only one section of this thing. So you guys just can look through the room and see who do I know, and shouldn't be that difficult at the end of the day, especially since it's mandatory. So, and you don't have a deliverable for next week, because the deliverable for next week will be the week after next week for the teams that decide. Probably for the first week, since we will want to make sure at least one team produces something for the first session. I'll probably like pick one person and say, hello, your team is required to do the first session and to submit it the week after.
Jiro, I think this would be a good participation exercise for somebody to spin up a Google Doc and make it the first post in Sam's Slack channel
that's even
with
better.
group tracking.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Who wants to participate by the only problem is I'm not sure if there's like some Quebec privacy laws that we're like breaking by doing that. I've taught long enough that I know that I get slapped sometimes for doing that.
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. Because maybe we're not requiring any. Okay, to be clear, we are not requiring anyone to do this. But if anyone wants to try to do it, go ahead. I think that would give us legal cover, and McGill legal cover, whatever. Fuck,
I think so.
Go ahead. I think Matt had his hand up first. Then I think it's Yuval. Is it? Oh, and Emil. Matt, your question?
Yeah. Just because it's actually incredibly valuable having these guest speakers coming on. And I was just thinking in terms of like, would there be an opportunity possibly in the brainstorming session of the previous thing to having like the last 15 minutes a place where you actually sort of brainstorm questions for the next person? In the sense, it just may like, we may just ask better questions or be able to like go around the subject a little bit better beforehand. And then so you coming on like a higher platform.
Yeah, we were actually planning on doing that today, right, Jiro? Of prepping the session with Joel at the end of today's class.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So that's a good idea. Good suggestion.
Emil?
Go ahead, Emil.
Yeah, hello. My question was related to the final project. So if I understood correctly, the first deliverable is going to be like about coming up with a founder, and I'm not sure I understood the
So
second
first of all,
deliverable.
we haven't laid out the details. We will lay out the
Okay, yeah.
details, in the next few weeks, let's say. Part of it is we want to kind of see how things are going, get a feel for you guys to try to get something that's as suitable as possible. But loosely speaking, first part will be kind of lay out a strategy for how you plan to source talent and startup. And if you've started doing it, describe what you've done so far. That'll probably be the first deliverable. And beyond that, we leave it to you to decide, how to execute on that, right? And then the final one is you shall have sourced it. It will be important for you to explain why you sourced what you sourced, what you think the superpowers of the talent and the startup are, what you think the weaknesses are. And finding a way to like get them to engage in the event in a way that looks good. So maybe you'll like prep them a little bit for the event, or maybe you do all those things. Like VCs help prepare their talent and their startups to succeed in the things they're doing next. So you'll end up doing a little bit of that. It's pretty it's pretty open-ended, but like real life is open-ended.
It looks like a very interesting project.
Yeah, we'll see.
I think the class is going to be very interesting as well.
Yeah, look, we hope it's going to be fun, but some things will almost surely fall flat, but hopefully there'll be some good high notes. Yes, Hussein.
For the sourcing project, did you say we need to find a startup from the Montreal area?
No, I mean, look, you can find it from anywhere you want, and we're going to do the event on Zoom anyway. You just need to convince them to be up at the right time.
Oh, I see.
So if you've got something from Turkey, that's all good.
Yeah, I'll try to. Yeah. So.
Any other questions?
So why don't we take 15 minutes right now, Jiro?
Sounds good to me.
Nice break.
All right, everybody, 15 minutes. So at 7:30, we'll get started with the rest of the lecture. So see you soon.